Hello and welcome to this episode of Inside HR. I'm Marty Bryson. I am the current president of HR Florida, and each month or so we host an Inside HR, giving individuals a deeper dive into a specific topic or area of HR. We really designed this for our emerging professionals, but it applies to anyone. Over the course of the past few years, HR Florida has developed a very growing relationship with ESGR. We have in the HR community strong ties to supporting our veterans. Yesterday was Veterans Day, and social media was flooded with thank yous from all over, individuals and community partners saying how much we appreciate the service that men and women provide to our government and to our nation. Those individuals are veterans. They have served in active duty and have left and turned to civilian life for the remainder of their careers. ESGR and HR Florida have really focused in on a slice of military life that are reservists and National Guard. These are individuals who have one foot in both environments at all times. The reservists get called up to supplement what is going on with the active military, and the reservists and the National Guard also supplement when needed. And so it is important as HR professionals that we understand what these individuals are going through and how we can best help them as they navigate going back and forth between these two worlds, these two cultures of work that they are doing. And so today we have with us Roger Trout, and he is a ESGR Chair Emeritus, who is going to walk us through the ethical responsibilities that a DoD volunteer uses and courses that they must take, the backbone, the foundation of that training when they become an ombudsman through ESGR. ESGR has three focuses because as these service people are navigating through the two worlds, there tends to be conflict just based on misunderstandings or lack of knowledge. And so ESGR has an ombuds program that works with the service person and the employer to resolve those conflicts. So now I want to turn this program over to Roger so that he can talk to us about that ethical program that is provided to all of the ESGR volunteers. Hi, Roger.
Hey, Marty, how you doing today?
Good.
Thank you for inviting me to do this. ESGR for one of the people that have never been exposed to it. We are a Department of Defense agency, and our job is to be between the service member and the HR professional, usually within the civilian world. There's a law that protects service members called USERRA. We'll brief that a little bit as we go along. Uniformed Services Employment and Reemployment Rights Act. So we have the opportunity to help service members because we're sending so many of them downrange to hostile environments and non-hostile environments as they supplement, as Marty said, the active force. For the first time in our nation's history, more than half of our reserve and guard folks, half of our military are reserve and guard folks. So we're relied heavily on them. And that also puts a strain on the employer. So what we'll do today is we'll go through the ethics training that we as volunteers are special government employees. So we have to follow a lot of very strict ethical rules. Having spent most of my reserve career working for a major corporation, I had to walk those lines for 20 years or so. And so I'll go back and forth and say how this applies in the civilian world, even though it's a DoD. So let's get started. Next slide, please. There we go. What we'll do during this is we'll review the, whoop, we went 2 slides. We'll review the ESGR's volunteers' responsibilities. And then you can see the difference between what you do and what they do. And we'll explore the ethical considerations through examples. And we'll identify ethics resources to consult to. Now, I want to point out the exam that this is to lead to so that you can have your ethics requirement completed, walks you through each of these areas, gives examples, and we'll do some of those today. And you take an exam. And then once you take the exam, if you miss, because you have to get 100%, if you miss anything, it allows you to go back and do it again until you get it right. So it's a very walkthrough kind of thing. So let's start. Next slide. Sorry, there we go. Just a little head through. We're allowed to, the USC 10 is what we go by. So if you as an HR professional know that when an ombudsman has a conversation with you about a possible violation, they will refer to the USC 10 code. And then you'll know which legal requirement you have. And what we'll usually do as ombudsman is we'll point to the specific USERRA violation that seems to be the case. When an ombudsman calls about a problem, it's because a service member has submitted an inquiry. He says, I think I'm being violated because of whatever. So when we call, we don't work for the servicemen. We work for the law. And so we're a mediator. And so what we're here to do is to get this thing resolved quickly to both sides' satisfaction. Next slide. Okay, here's the basics. And I always tell people, always do the right thing even when it's hard, and then we could end this whole conversation. But here's and equate those to your own organization. So number one, interest of the organization take precedence over private interests. Easy enough to know. Hold no financial conflict with your company. Do not use non-public info for private gain. We see this all the time in insider trading cases. On TV, when somebody's using inside information to sell or buy stocks, it's the same thing. No public info, no gifts, and we'll talk about some examples. And that's the taking of gifts. Just do an honest effort at work. Don't promise on behalf of your organization if it's not within your limits of authority. Do not use your office for private gain. No preferential treatment. Be fair. Protect government or organization property. No job that would conflict with government or with your some people hold more than one job down. You have to be careful, what you're doing and if it's going to reflect badly on the government or on your company. No job that would conflict with government. Disclose fraud, waste, and abuse. If you know about it, you see something, say something, as they've been saying a lot lately. Yeah, disclose fraud, waste, and abuse. Pay your debts, because you get, somebody who's got a lot of debts can be bribed. And so they just stay clean, follow EEO rules, and avoid appearance of private gain. This one's going to be a big one on the appearance thing, because some things are gray area. And that's why we'll talk about in private practice talking to this company attorney, or in this case, we talk to a regional representative. Okay, next slide. So we're going to cover 4 categories today. Conflict of interest, impartiality, misuse of position, and gifts. These are the 4 major areas that folks get into trouble over. And for the remainder of the training, we'll focus on those 4 categories. Next slide. Okay, as an ESGR volunteer, you're not positive that an action you're about to take is appropriate, then we have to go to a certain area. Yours probably would be the attorney. I call it having an alarm go off in your head. I'm not so sure about that, because a lot of things are gray area. Consult somebody, don't guess. That's the best way of violating the standards. act in good faith and rely on the advice of your attorney and your company attorney. And keep in mind, there is no attorney-client privilege between you and the agency's DHRA attorney. I suspect that's the case in most organizations. But avoid the appearance of a conflict of interest or an ethical failure. Just avoid it altogether. Next slide. Okay, for instance, here's an example. Patty meets weekly with representatives of a large business in her employer outreach role as an ESGR volunteer. In our employer outreach role, we do things like I just did with a city, is I will give a 1-hour USERRA class to any supervisors, managers, HR people. I'm called on a lot of times to do that so that you have a really good idea. Because I'd like to get rid of the ombudsman job and just stay with it ahead of time. So we'll come out, it's free of charge, and do those kinds of. So here we got Patty meeting with representatives of a large business in her employer outreach role as an ESGR volunteer. They customarily treat her to a small breakfast. So the rules in the government, anyhow, and I don't know about your company, you've got a problem there with your showing preference to a large, and the other one is that, as you'll see in the rules, $20 or below, it's okay. It's usually coffee, donuts, that kind of thing. But a meal is going to go over the $50 annual rule. So I don't know what your rule is in your company, but make sure you have those, and you're not showing favoritism towards this business, because that's a conflict of interest. Next. Anything of value, any item of monetary value, including gratuity, favor, service, discount, entertainment, or hospitality. Accepting a gift, even if it's nominal in value, in return for being influenced in the performance of an official act, is a bribe. At $20 and less, but not cash or investment interest, and not more than $50 in a year. And if you're doing a speaking engagement, which we all do, I know Marty does a lot of them, so do I. Consider this one. If you are asked to present as a representative of ESGR or your company at a weekly attended gathering which costs money to attend, you are offered free registration to attend the entire conference. Well, you have to really look at, the rules within our company or within the federal government. We're allowed to do those kinds of things if it's offered to other people, not just to us. So if you're going to one of these things, and that's why I said a widely attended gathering, and you're the only one being offered free meal or entrance into this event, then you need to be careful, because then it can be considered a conflict of interest. Next slide. Loans or discounts available to the general public. Okay, so we're saying it's not just you that's getting some special deal. Greeting cards, plaques, little intrinsic value. Just be careful of the perception. And modest food or refreshments, they're okay. But just be careful and just always be mindful of that possible conflict. Next slide. Gifts may not see, was just talked about $50 based on personal worth in a calendar year, based on personal relationship, family, friends, based solely on your spouse's employment, special invitations from other than prohibited sources, and certain gifts from foreign governments. Invitations to widely attended gatherings. So these are okay. Yeah, you don't have to worry about that. Patty meets weekly with representatives of a large business in her role as a volunteer, showing favoritism. You need to be careful about that when you're doing stuff with other companies. Next slide. One of the ways Patty conducts employer outreach is to meet with leadership from different businesses each week. Is that okay? Yes, because she's not showing favoritism. Richard, as an ESGR ombudsman, is approached by a colleague from his work to request to mediate, as we talked about, a case between their employer and another colleague who is in the Army National Guard. No, it's a conflict of interest. Next slide. Okay. Volunteers may not, in the course of performing volunteer duties, take actions that affect the financial interests of members of his household, or take actions that affect people with whom he has a covered relationship. members of your household, relatives with close personal, persons or organizations which you are seeking to have business. Persons or organizations, you can't give the impression that you're representing your company or the government when you're doing these kinds of things, because then it's saying, oh, okay, Mobile Oil, who I work for, is behind this particular activity. So you got to ensure impartiality and not be questions as to what your motives are, whether they're pure or not. Intention, Next slide. Joe, a computer.com representative, is seeking to establish a relationship with California ESGR committee. He invites several California ESGR volunteers to a golf tournament at his company's expense. Now, in the corporate world, you have a lot of a similar kind of thing, and you just have to be really careful of it. In this particular case, no, because he's inviting or assuming right now that nobody else is getting this freebie golf tournament. That it's being specifically offered to us. And that's when you get into an ethical concern. Okay, next question or slide. Business cards. Here's a big one that we run into. You all get business cards just as we do. We get ESGR business cards. And we can't use those if we're doing something outside of the realm of our job as a volunteer. Where we run into it in our organization is people that become ESGR volunteers, or in this case, an ombudsman, hand out their own personal business cards during ESGR events or during other kinds of events, along with their ESGR card. You got to keep that whole relationship separate. So he was violating it quite clearly by handing out his ESGR business cards. Nina is on the board of a nonprofit animal shelter while acting as a mediator. During a moment of small talk, another person in the room mentions their love of animal shelters. Upon hearing this, Lisa explains how someone can make a donation to the nonprofit. That's okay. So we're trying to, make it, you can't get closed up in a clam. That's perfectly all right, because she's not trying to benefit herself or some other commercial involvement. Next slide. Oscar, who's a state chair, is in charge of raising funds for his Little League team. He offers his volunteers an opportunity to donate to his son's Little League team. No, it's like you go around the office and say, hey, I'm doing this particular thing and I want to, without approval of the attorney. So make sure if you're going to do any of that kind of stuff that, you do it, with the guidance of your attorney. Next one. Janelle, an ESGR volunteer, would like a job with a specific government contractor. She arranged a meeting with the CEO as an ESGR volunteer. During this meeting, she expresses interest in working for the contractor. You can see where that'd be a real problem. And we can't do that, obviously, as special government employees. But also, if you happen to be meeting with somebody at another company as part of your employment, and, I'd really rather work for these people than the people I work for. So you start having a conversation with somebody over there about, hey, are you hiring? Be careful. Don't do things like that. And that's what they're talking about here. Next question. Senator Fred, there's a good one, because we just had an election, I think, is up for re-election and asked to attend an event honoring employer support of the Guard and Reserve. No. Now, if he's not up for re-election and wants to come, that's fine. But during a campaign, coming to a meeting of employer support of the Guard and Reserve and all that, which is an obviously part of his campaign activity, is a no-no. It's obviously you can't. I'm sure that within your company, there's also the conversation that you can't be seen as wearing your company logo shirt out there campaigning for any particular person. So just be careful of doing things like that. Excellent. Okay. a little bit more on that political activity thing, because especially for government employees, as we are. Political activity is an activity directed toward the success or failure of a political party. Now, as a civilian, even if we can, I could be out there, stomping the political trail for anybody I want to as a private citizen. We all have that right. So just don't do it. I wouldn't do it with my ESGR shirt on. Just don't do it with any of that kind of because then it implies that ESGR is supporting candidate A instead of candidate B, and that'll get you fired in about 3 seconds. And that's pursuant to USC government. Federal employees retain a constitutional right to petition the U.S. Congress in a personal capacity or a representative capacity on behalf of outside persons or organizations. If you belong to another organization, that's that. Clearly state that you're there on a personal capacity and not in your official ESGR capacity. If these people know you as a chair of a state committee, as I was, and you go to one of those events, you don't want the perception that you're there saying that ESGR Virginia, in my case, is supporting candidate A. That one can get in a lot of trouble. Next one. Most federal civilian employees may actively participate in political campaigns. You may not engage in activities while as a volunteer, as we just said, and you may not use your official title, position, or authority when engaging in partisan political activities. So I would not have Roger Trout is here, Chair Emeritus of ESGR in support of this candidate. To some people, it's obvious not to do that, but if you're well known in a particular area and they know you work for somebody or you're a volunteer in our case, state up front. I'm here just purely as my own. You see that all the time, on television when there's an advertisement coming on or a special session coming on, and they'll say these are strictly the thoughts of the commercial provider and not of the station. So they want to make it really clear too. So just do that. So next one. Tricia remarks at a Patriot Awards ceremony. Now, we also, not just ombudsman, but we have an awards function within ESGR. We encourage these reserve and guard folks, if they've got a manager, supervisor, co-worker at their company, that they put them in for what's called a Patriot Award. And we come out and we award them the award. It's a very nice thing. You can see that on esgr.mil. And we provide all of those kind of things. And it leads up to the Freedom Award, which is the top 15 organizations in the country, large company, small company, public, that get awarded the Freedom Award. And it's held in Washington, D.C. at the Pentagon, and it's a pretty big deal. It gets a lot of publicity for a company. And so this is perfectly all right. Tricia I want you to notice the difference before we get to the next slide. Tricia remarks, congrats to the company on being a Freedom Award followers. They are exemplary in their support of members of the Guard and Reserve. Next slide. Now see the difference here. Same thing, but at the end, and provide a fantastic product. So you're showing favoritism. And so that's how careful we have to be in things like that. But if you're in a public position, you may want to be concerned about that as well. Next slide. You may participate as a speaker in a non-federal entity event in your official capacity if, so this would follow along with yourself, you're not compensated by them, the gift rules. What you're talking about reflects the rules that the government has set out, and I guess the rules that your company has set out on a lot of things. Avoid the use of your official title or state or imply official endorsement or sanction of any non-federal entity, product, service, or activity outside performance of official duties. Official titles may be used only for limited purposes, such as providing biographical information. Next slide. You may not, in your official capacity, actively and visibly promote, produce, or present NFE fundraising event. This includes requesting or encouraging the giving of donations. And we saw the example where it was okay earlier. serving as honorary chairperson, not in your official capacity, sitting at the head table, standing in a reception line, or serving as master of ceremonies. In other words, you, as a representative of your organization, when you're out in those even other entities, at the non-federal entities in our case, you have to be careful of making anybody in the room believe that you're doing it representing your organization. So we have to be really careful. We have to make very sure we're at this fundraising event as a civilian, as you know, and as I said, if you're well known, then make sure you make that clear when you do it. Don't give anybody the impression, okay, mobile, you know, or the government says that, you know, this is a good thing. Next slide. Yep. Okay. Samantha recommends that a company with whom she has a business relationship sign a statement of support. Is there now statement of support? One of the things that we have, and I encourage anybody who wants one to let me know, is a statement of all of the things that you believe in as a company when it relates to your Guard and Reserve folks, and it's signed, and you keep it in your place of work, and post it where it can be seen by anybody who walks in there. So this is what we're about. We support our Guard and Reserve folks. But that's okay as long as, you know, there's no real ethical concern there. Next one. Next slide. There we go. Now here's one that we run into. Greg places his organization's corporate logo on ESGR materials to make sure that others remember him via multiple remembrance crews. No, that is not permissible. And as you'll see, the ESGR logo is trademarked and is very, you know, very fussy. And I talked earlier about handing business cards out, you know, when you're out there, your business card and your ESGR business card. You gotta stay out of that conflict of interest rule. Next one. Worry about logos. DoD logo and ESGR logo are trademarked. So even in your own, if you're an ESGR volunteer, for instance, putting the ESGR logo or a DoD logo on your personal stuff or your business stuff is a no-no. There's no exceptions. They get very fussy about that if you do that. In the course of conversation with a state representative, Tamara, an ESGR representative, shares her recommendations for legislation on the upcoming defense authorization bill. Now, because that suggests, remember, as an ESGR representative, now as a civilian, as a perfectly, you know, private, absolutely she can do that. But because if she does it like that, it may be construed that ESGR is supporting this particular. In the military world, we have organizations like MOAA and Association of the United States Army, Military Officers Association, and the association. That's their job. They go try and get as much as possible for our service members through legislation. But ESGR is not in that game. And I suspect your company might, you know. Alexis is scheduled to host a volunteer recruitment booth at an upcoming event. While she is setting up her booth, she asked an event staff member if there is electricity available for her booth. The staff member informs her that there is electricity, but there's a cost. This one goes to you can't obligate the government unless, and in your case, in the civilian world, if it's within your limits of authority, then you're good to go. But you have to see to that. But in the case of a government employee, we can't obligate the government. Worry about what is meant by non-public information. Now, this is that teaching, speaking, and writing. And if you do a lot of that, as we do, classified information. I'm sure that your companies have non-public information. Internal DoD information, Privacy Act protected records. Privacy Act stuff is big within the government. We use all security clearances and things like that to help with that. But within your organization, if you don't have a really good code of conduct when it comes to Privacy Act information, because there's so many entities out there stealing data and information. You ought to put one in. Budgetary information, confidential procurement information, trade secrets. May not use non-public information for personal business, teaching, speaking, or writing. Anything not already released to the public. Public speaking can be a great way to share experiences. I do it quite a bit, but I do it ethically. I never mention a company name. If I say, well, a certain company did this, and therefore, you need to be careful not doing that. I wouldn't never mention the company or the individuals involved. So be careful with that. And we don't get paid. The nice thing about being a volunteer is I can ask for whatever I want. What are they going to do? Reduce my pay. Okay, next. If you are seeking non-federal employment, you may not represent yourself to potential employers for personal gain under the guise of the ESGR mission. You'll have to see how that applies within your companies. Next one. Violating ethics principles may result in dismissal or disciplinary corrective action, including criminal prosecution. So be proactive. If it smells like it could be an ethics violation, don't hesitate. Get your contact within the attorney organization that you have, department, and just if it doesn't smell right or the appearance is going to be there, ask, because then you can lean back on that. Please submit it. And here we have to talk to the regional. We have regional representatives, so we would talk to them and say, I'm not sure whether this is good or not, or whether I can do this or not, and then go from there. There's the websites for the government ethics and standards of conduct office. If you want further information, you can certainly go to those. So there's been a lot. Here's a review. ESGR volunteer responsibilities, ethical considerations through examples, and identify resources and actions to take for ethical questions. So now you can go take the course. Next slide. Okay, here's some potential handouts for any of those different issues that you might want to look at. Some of them would apply to you, some of them just to government types. The next slide. Any questions? I mean, esgr.mil has got all of the good information that you may need. I think you've got the link to go ahead and take the class. I think I was sent to you, but if you don't have it, let us know and we'll get it to you really quickly. I think Marty's got it. I thought it was on this slide, but yeah. But the ethics thing is, it's the thing that gets our volunteers in trouble if they're not careful, because trying to, I may have a private business and I'm also a volunteer, and you have to be really careful to keep the two separate. So.
Well, Roger, thank you for sharing this with us. I mentioned in the chat that
yeah, there it is. Good.
That we had many similar nuances between what you go through in being an ESGR volunteer and what we see on a daily basis in our HR roles. The nuances are so vast, and they are so very situation specific. That's why we felt it was so important to have you on, and so that everyone in our HR community could learn a little bit more and see ethics from a different perspective. We were able to get this program pre-certified through both SHRM and HRCI. Anyone that is an SPHR through HRCI can use this as their ethics course for the year. And also on the comments, Troy has provided us with the links to the specific ESGR ethics course that all ombudsmen take, along with ESG USERRA 101 and USERRA 102 for a deeper dive into the regulations that impact employers who have guard and reserves in their employment. Opening it up now for comments. If there's anyone that would like to say anything, happy to answer either from an HR perspective or from the ESGR perspective.
I just like to add one thing on the courses. The ethics course, every volunteer, not just ombudsman, has to take the ethics course once a year, and USERRA 101 once a year, and then USERRA 102 then gets dives even deeper. So the ombudsman need to take that every year as well.
So, Roger, you and I have a great relationship, and I have your ESGR business card so that I can call you or contact you whenever I need to. But what would someone in our listening community, how would they best get a hold of a representative in their area if they needed help?
You could go out, as I said, the ESGR.mil, and then go to your state. And it'll help provide you with a link and a phone number. Every state, just so you know how we're organized, we're 54 communities. We're in every state and territories. There's at least one full-time person in each one of those states, and that's the number that'll be shown. And I get stuff from our full-time person up in North Florida all the time, where somebody has called in and said, I have a USERRA question or something like that, and he gets it right down to me. My number's on there too. Send me questions directly if you need to, or if you can't find who your contact is in a particular state or anything like that, shoot me a note and I'll get it back to you as quickly as I can. Yeah, that's the quickest way to do it. And remember that when there's an ombudsman case, that it is an inquiry. What happens if I can't resolve it as an ombudsman? And this thing doesn't sit on a bureaucrat's desk. When a service member has a question, it goes immediately to an ombudsman, and within 48 hours, we are required to contact that individual and talk about it. Is this really a violation? What is the problem? And then and only then, if we realize, if the two of us say, yeah, sure enough, this looks like a violation, I get permission from that service member to call the HR representative. I only want to talk to HR. I never talk to a manager or a supervisor. I just go to HR. You all should know the rules. And I have to mark the date and time that young woman or that young man said, yeah, you can call. Because the service member has to maintain control. It's his job. I mean, it's her full-time job, so we don't want to mess that up. And then I'll call and I'll say, here's what we're looking at. What are we missing? And 90% of the cases or so, we solve it. Because
Awesome.
it's informal mediation. If I can't solve it within 7 working days, if it's a termination, and 14 working days if it's benefits or some other kind of issue, then the service member can take it to Department of Justice, Department of Labor, because I don't have subpoena capability. And then they'll come looking for records. Sometimes in 20 years of doing this, I've had probably 5 or 6 HR managers who wanted to tick me off. It's not the word I was going to use, but I figure, anyhow, and it never worked out well. And it's because they just were obstinate. But once you show them the rules, because they're complex, there's a lot of things in there. I could give examples of cases for the next half hour, but if there's some complex stuff, if it's a question, ask us. We also will look at your human resources manual in the section applying to military types, and we'll look through and make sure that it doesn't violate USERRA rules. Had one Marine show me his the other day, and right there in it, it said, if you are on active duty, military active duty for more than 30 days, you're fired,
Ooh.
quote unquote. You know, so, that kind of thing, can be totally avoided. Employers are tired. I understand that. And we've been, ever since, 9/11, we've been sending these young men and women downrange to just send a bunch of them the other day out to Syria and places like that. We've got them all over to Kuwait, to Africa, um, because they supplement the force. The Army Reserve, for instance, I'm also an Army Reserve ambassador, which means I report directly to the Chief of the Army Reserve, the 3-star general, and I carry a 2-star capability. And so I'm able to get into the higher echelons of the military and get something straightened out. And I would encourage the folks that are on this, if you've got a reserve or guard employee, get his commanding officers or her commanding officers phone number and email address and talk to them. I mean, even things like all of a sudden you're in the middle of a negotiation, and the employee that's the one that's doing most of the negotiating is now being called up. You can call the commander of that unit and have a conversation about, can we delay her call up? Can we delay it until she goes 3 months from now? We're not trying to get out of her duty. We're just saying, is it something? And conversely, and I had this question asked to me the other day when I was doing a presentation, you'll get the service member who decides to double dip or things like that, and he or she keeps asking for more orders. So all of a sudden, I had a police chief tell me, I've had this kid on the force for 4 years. He's been on duty 4 months. He just keeps getting orders. Call up his commander, and I said, has he got a military specialty you can't get? No. He said, it's not a problem for work. I said, well, here's what's going on. He said, okay, that'll be the last set of orders he gets. But the law built in a 5-year rule for employers. It says if this person's gone cumulatively with one employee, one employer for 5 years or more, then he's not covered by USERRA. You're on your own because you've changed careers.
Yes, truly, you've become almost a full-time service member in that case. So much information. And one of the things that HR Florida is doing is helping each of the local chapters to connect with a USERRA volunteer in their area so that they do have a local contact, someone that they're familiar with. But you know what? Sometimes familiarity is tough, because you went through all of these examples of, a non-hosted dinner. And there are many times where we want to show our appreciation and we might pay the bill for someone's meal. What does the ESGR representative do when someone ambushes them or goes behind their back and covers the cost of a meal for them, or gives them a complimentary registration to something?
If you find out about it later and you can somehow reimburse, then you do that, because we do get paid our expenses. And so, if it's in that case, and you bought a $50 lunch for me or something like that, or dinner, and I find out about it, I can reimburse you that money, and then I can put in a chit to the government to say, these were my, for per diem in that case. I mean, they just sort of, there's several ways that we can do it, but just be careful about that thing. All our volunteers know that. I mean, they know we very rarely get into that situation. And I've only known about a couple of volunteers that have been fired over something like that.
Yeah. We talk about civility, we talk about kindness, and one of the ways that you can show kindness is random acts of generosity. And so I don't think that anyone has ever done that in a manner to get the ESGR volunteer in trouble. They're trying to be kind,
Correct. And that's why I say, just have a feel for what may be perceived to be a conflict, and you'll be okay. Yes, we've had that. We have that all the time. I know. If, for instance, you're having some sort of a meeting, a large meeting, and there's a lot of people involved, and you're providing complimentary meals or admission or whatever the case may be to other people,
Mm-hmm.
Then it's okay. I mean, because we do that we'll get invited to go to an HR Florida thing, and they'll say, the ESGR doesn't have to pay for the table or the booth or
Right.
whatever.
Yes.
But it's also offered to other people. It is
Mm-hmm.
not just exclusively for us. Then it's okay.
And I think that may be the big distinguisher right there, that we're not treating the ESGR volunteer different. And it's only
Right.
when you treat them different that you can run into conflicts of interest.
Right. As long as you're offering it to other folks, then, which is usually the case at most of these functions that we go to, because we do get complimentary. We pay for quite a few too. We have to go through
Mm-hmm.
a process to make that happen. We do not have deep pockets.
Got it. Totally understand. Well, I do want to offer a couple of last minute for questions or comments from the group, but I want to thank you so very much for taking the time today to talk with us about ethics and bringing it to us from a different perspective, a different organization's perspective, because there are so many similarities.
Yep. And I'll be glad to follow up any questions that somebody was afraid to stick up here because they didn't want you to think they're stupid.
Yes, yes. We have
We all do
recorded
that.
this. Yes, we have recorded this. It will be available on the HR Florida website for repeat viewing or viewing by others who weren't able to join us today. It has been my delight to have you.
That's been my pleasure, and
And
thank
it
you for
will
having me.
also, yes, and it will also be available for reviewing on the same social media channels that the live stream was on. So if you were viewing us on Facebook, if you were viewing us on LinkedIn or any other platform, you can go back, share with your friends and coworkers, colleagues, so that they also can take advantage of the information, and if they need the PDCs or recertification hours.
Very cool.
Thank you all. Have a wonderful day, and I will talk with each and every one of you very, very shortly. Bye.